Shabbat Shalom. It is good to be back. I have lots of things to share from my time away. I'm not going to try and share it all at once. It will come out, I'm sure, in various times and places in the weeks to come. This morning, I want to try to do three things. I want to try to weave together things from my week. Number one, an article in class that I took with Rabbi Gordon Tucker, who's the Vice Chancellor of the Jewish Theological Seminary. I want to offer a reflection on the book of Deuteronomy, and I want to share with you something that I try to share with the kids when I am at camp. So we'll see if we can do those three things and weave it all together. In a class that I took with Rabbi Gordon Tucker, he teaches, and in this paper, he teaches about a struggle between two schools of thought, admittedly from different time periods, but he argues that have their expression in all times, between the legal positivists and Plato. So Plato, Tucker writes, bequeathed to us a metaphysical view in which there were abstract realities and truths that lay beyond our senses and the subjectivity of our minds. These included such abstract objects as love, beauty, and virtue, moral verities that were eternally true, independent of the human mind. Legal positivists, on the other hand, stress what he calls the exclusive value of experience. That is, of the data we get from our senses for the derivation of truth. There is, according to the legal positivists, no meaningful notion of natural law or justice in any abstract or transcendent sense. In halakha, Jewish law, this conflict between the positivists and Plato finds its expression in the famous story of the Tanur Shel Ochnai, where Rabbi Eliezer, if you remember, insists that he's right and insists upon calling and calls upon miracles such as a carob tree that gets up and walks, rivers that flow backwards, and ultimately a bat kol, a divine voice, calls out from heaven to prove that he is right, while the rabbis famously retort, lo bashamayim hi, the Torah is no longer or is not in heaven. When they say lo bashamayim hi, what they mean is that when we figure out Jewish law, we no longer accept any proofs or ideas that, quote, lay beyond our senses and the subjectivity of our minds. When it comes to law, the Torah is no longer beyond us. Things like prophecy, divine voices, and miracles are too unpredictable and destabilizing. The rabbis say we need a more stable way of experiencing God, one that is uncorruptible and by unregulated individual claims of religious authority. At the end of the Tanur Shel Ochnai, when asked how God responded to the rabbi's declaration, the Torah is no longer in heaven, the story says that Elijah said, that God said, Nitzchuni banai, which is often translated as, my children have defeated me. And it's read as God delighting in God's children taking responsibility for themselves and the law. But Tucker suggests an alternative and better translation of that phrase, nitzchuni banai, based on the way in which that verb is used in the story, might actually be, my children have attacked me. He says the divine smile in that moment can only be reflecting God's knowledge that the children in this story have not, in fact, attacked or defeated God. They've attacked themselves and defeated themselves because they put themselves on a path to the religious incompleteness that will handicap them for as long as attempts to help us hear the divine voice are systematically silenced. Put more simply, according to Tucker, at the end of that story, the rabbis and we have exiled God from religion. Now, let me bring you to a text that I studied in relation to the book of Deuteronomy. The rabbis say in Sanhedrin 99a that if a person says that the whole of the Torah is from heaven except for a particular verse which was not uttered by God but was actually spoken by Moshe's own mouth, that person has disgraced the word of God. I don't know what they would do with biblical criticism. But in that teaching, the rabbis haven't exiled God from the Torah. They've exiled human beings from the Torah. According to that teaching, any human involvement corrupts the perfection of divine revelation. In this reading, the Torah is not only not in heaven, it's only in heaven. So which is it? Is the Torah only in heaven, or is the Torah not in heaven and only among us? Which brings me to the book of Deuteronomy. Abarbanel, a 16th century commentator who I'm spending a lot of time studying this year, says something amazing about the authorship of the book of Deuteronomy in his commentary. In his introduction, he says that when the Torah says, Eila hadivrim asher diber Moshe, these are the words that Moses spoke. And I'm going to quote Abarbanel here. Moses himself spoke these words. And the divine wisdom, may it be blessed, saw it fit to command that it be written as a book, along with the other parts of the Torah. There's a human book that was written with divine approval in the Torah, according to Abarbanel. The rabbis call the book of Deuteronomy Mishneh Torah, which can mean a second Torah. Israeli scholar Micha Goodman explains that the stories in Deuteronomy are the stories earlier in the Torah are retold in Moses' final address, but they're not identical to the original versions. Goodman writes, the human reconstruction of the divine Torah refashions the text and interprets it anew. And this is an amazing phrase. The last book of the Torah is also the first commentary on it. Abraham Joshua Heschel says the Torah consists of 5 books, and the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law by Yosef Karo, has 4 books. So the rabbis ask, where's the missing part of the law? We're 1 book short. And Rabbi Yisrael of Rushin says the missing part is the person. Without the living participation of the human being, the law is incomplete. In this model, the Torah is not only in heaven and the Torah is not only among us, but in this model, human participation doesn't corrupt divine revelation, it completes it. We are needed for God's voice to be heard in the world. When God comes to Moshe and says, I want you to bring the Jewish people out of Egypt, Moshe says to him, Ish divarim, lo ish divarim anochi. I'm not a man of words. I'm not a man of divarim. We're just about to read an entire book called Eila hadivrim asher diber Moshe. A whole book of words that Moshe spoke. In that moment in Exodus when God comes to Moshe, Moshe says, I'm not a man of words. God reassures Moshe and says, Va'ata lech va'anochi ehyeh im picha. I'm going to go and be with your mouth. V'horeiticha asher tidaber, which means I'm going to show you what to say. But David Kasher, who writes about this in his Hadar Devar Torah this week, he says maybe the meaning of that phrase is that word horeiticha has what word in it? Torah. It is as if God says to Moshe, I'm going to turn you into Torah. Which brings me to camp. I love being at camp. It's not a vacation, you should know, right? I teach a lot of classes. The meals are the volume of an airplane engine going by. They are noisy, but it is an energizing place to be and to see Jewish life live so joyfully and to see so many kids experiencing such joy. Inevitably, there is one Devar Torah that I try to make sure to give to the older campers. And the lesson of that Devar Torah is that society tries to tell us in so many ways how unimportant we are, that our worth as people is measured by the grades we get or the things we own or the number of likes that we get on social media. And I remind them that Judaism is countercultural, that Judaism measures our worth in eternal truths, not in how much we have, but how generous we are, not in what we achieve, but in the kindness that we embody in the world, that we are not cogs in some machine, that we are God's partners, that we are vessels for bringing God's voice into the world, that we can be like Moshe, Torah. It's the message I try to teach the kids, and it's one worth our remembering as we begin the book of Devarim this year. Today is Shabbat Chazon. We start Tisha B'Av on Monday night. We will mourn not only the destruction of two buildings in Jerusalem a long time ago, but those buildings represented something much more important. They represented the presence of God in our midst. And we mourn the exile of God. Maybe we've exiled God from the Beit Midrash. And maybe we've exiled God by refusing to acknowledge the presence of God in our own voices and in what we do and who we are. On Tuesday afternoon, we'll have Echa reading Monday night. Hopefully you got the email. On Tuesday afternoon at 6:30, we will screen a movie called Legend of Destruction that retells the story of the destruction of Jerusalem from so long ago, but that reminds us that the senseless hatred from so long ago is still living among us, driving God's presence away when we fail to recognize that we and that our fellow human beings and fellow Jews are Torah. If speaking words of Torah could transform Moshe himself into Torah, then maybe that can happen for us as well as we read and study and chant the words. And as we walk through the world, we walk through the world as Jews. And part of what that means is that people look at us and they associate us with Torah. And so how can we change ourselves by thinking to ourselves, every word that I speak, every action that I do reflects or, God forbid, obscures the divine presence. We have become a part of the Torah. Let who we are in the world reflect that. Shabbat Shalom.